Okay, let's bring this up. Again, it's very graphic video. I understand if people need to take this one off tonight. I completely understand that. But let's hear from JB Nichols, and he's going to kind of walk us through what's happening here.
Corrections officers in New York
Right back.
killed inmate Robert Brooks on December 9th, 2024. 4 of them unknowingly recorded the killing with their body-worn cameras. They didn't activate the cameras, but they were powered on, which enabled video to be recovered. The sound was not recoverable, so a close visual analysis is required to understand what's happening in the video that you see. That's Brooks right there.
I just want to pause this. One thing that I noticed in this room, Todd, when I look up at the ceiling and the corners, guess what's not up there? There's no cameras. There's no cameras in this room. So I'm wondering, and I'm pretty sure, that these officers know there's no cameras in this room. And that's why they most likely took him there.
That's where you go.
Yep.
Sitting in green on the edge of an examination table in the prison's infirmary. Note the time in the upper right-hand corner of the video, which I've verified is accurate. It's 21:23 in military time. That's 9:23 p.m. In 20 minutes, Brooks will be dead.
I'm JB Nichols, criminal justice reporter for the Freelance News. I've covered crime, courts, and prisons for the last 20 years. I'm going to back the tape up, and I'm going to walk you through the killing of Robert Brooks from the beginning.
I've used all 4 of the body camera videos to make this video. For clarity, I've marked in the upper left-hand corner the name of the guard whose camera recorded the video that's playing. This is video from Sergeant Glenn Trombley's body-worn video camera as he gets into a van with CO Anthony Farina. According to sworn testimony,
and I want everybody to remember that name, Anthony Farina, because you're going to see a lot of him in this video. And he deserves everything that he gets and more.
In a federal civil rights lawsuit exclusively revealed by the Freelance, Sergeant Trombley is the leader of the prison's beat-up squad, and Farina is a member of the squad. Every prison has a beat-up squad. Beat-up squads are a kind of quick reaction force that respond to fights and other emergencies. Trombley and Farina are about to arrive at one of the prison's exits and entrances called a sally port. That's where a squad of COs have Brooks handcuffed on the ground. Notice that when Trombley gets out of the van, he opens its side doors. That's because they usually place prisoners in the van to move them around inside the facility. This time, they will not use the van. We don't know how or why they all got here, but Brooks is handcuffed on the ground. Another sergeant, Michael Mashaw, is already there. So,
and I'm going to pause this again really quick. And that's something that I want people to keep note of as well. Handcuffed and leg restraints through this entire time. He had no way to defend himself from these animals. From these animals. Todd, at any point, if you need to stop and you want to comment, please just let me know.
Will do.
Our COs, Robert Kessler, Nicholas Anzalone, Nicholas Kiefer, and David Kingsley. Anzalone and Kessler are going to stand Brooks up with his hands behind his back, bend him forward, and walk him away. That's Farina on the right. Behind them, right to left, are Sergeant Mashaw, Farina, Kingsley, and in the back, Kiefer.
And I'll say this, Farina, and if you Karen Reed supporters and watchers that know the case, and I'll say this, I know Todd won't, but I will, reminds me an awful lot of Brian Albert. Got that attitude.
It's 9:21 and 36 seconds. 10 seconds later, CO Matthew Gallagher's camera captures Kessler, Anzalone, and Kingsley walking Brooks past the open doors of the van. That's Kessler to the right, Anzalone on the left, Brooks in the middle walking, bent over, and then Kingsley following them. This is important because the next time we see Brooks, he's going to be being carried by these three men into the infirmary. Less than a minute later, according to CO Michael Along's camera, Kessler, Anzalone, and Kingsley carry Brooks into the infirmary. He's unconscious, it appears, and no longer walking like he was when he was last seen. CO David Walters, turning the corner right there, follows them up the hallway into the infirmary and tells nurses Kyle Dashnow and Abedin Medovic don't go in the room to treat Brooks. He turns them away.
No cameras. There's no cameras in this area. Everywhere I look, there's no
Here he
cameras.
is raising his right hand, holding it out, and gesturing toward Dashnow, freezing Dashnow in his tracks. Here it is again. Inside the room, Kingsley and Anzalone have Brooks pinned face down on the table, and it looks like Kingsley is trying to use the edge of the table to break Brooks' lower leg. 9:23:45, Sergeant Trombley arrives. There's Farina, Sergeant Mashaw. Brooks is conscious. There's Anzalone, Kessler, and Kingsley in the room. In walks CO Christopher Walrath, who has a lot to say to Brooks. We don't know what Walrath's role in this is, but it appears that whatever triggered this, Walrath was there when it started. Now, there goes Kiefer,
There's Farina.
Walrath behind him, and on his way out, Farina taps him. See that there? Farina taps Walworth to tell him something. Something like, hey, I got you. Walrath's out. Farina goes in, starts putting his gloves on, and Brooks has less than 18 minutes to live. It's 9:25. Farina is about to gag Brooks with a white rag. Anzalone has one of Brooks's boots in his hand, and it looks like he's hitting Brooks with it. Then Anzalone starts pounding away on Brooks. CO Gallagher is there watching. Here it is from the other side of the room with CO Matthew Gallagher's camera. There's Farina stuffing the rag in Brooks's mouth and then punching him repeatedly in the face. While Farina is punching Brooks in the face, Kingsley is pinning his neck to the table. Now he's lifting him up and choking him. Lifting him up by the neck, choking him and dropping him repeatedly back to the table. He does this 4 times. Back to the other side of the room and Sergeant Trombley's camera. There's Gallagher in the room. There goes Farina stomping on Brooks' genitals while they pin him to the table and punch him repeatedly. Gallagher has his hand on Brooks' throat. Here comes Walrath back. Walrath is grabbing Brooks' leg with Farina and twisting. Kiefer's back in the room too, on the far side of the room, standing there. There's Kessler. Michael Fisher, CO Michael Fisher in the doorway. This is from Michael Fisher's camera. When Farina was gagging Brooks, Brooks must have bit him because you see him, he took his glove off and he checked his finger and he grimaced. Now here's Kessler walking into the room. Kiefer is already in there, but Kiefer just got directed to leave the room by Sergeant Trombley. Let's watch that again. There's Trombley
Brian,
pointing at Kiefer across the room, and then
so again, we tend to focus in on where the abuse is happening. Everyone in that room, everyone in that hallway is complicit. This is what we saw in the Derek Chauvin case, where the other 2 officers were also charged. They didn't have their knee on George Floyd's neck.
Right.
However, they didn't stop Chauvin either. So and again,
Yeah.
my law enforcement background is in policing, not corrections, but it applies. It's the same custodial care that when you have a prisoner, in this case, you have an inmate, that there's a duty to intervene. That's not new. It's in the books now. It's written in policies and procedures, which is new. However, if you have any sense of moral guidance
Yeah.
in your career, you stop it.
Yeah. Yeah. There's many officers in that room that had an opportunity to say, hey, that's enough.
Enough.
Or even that nurse runs in and says, that's enough. They know what's going on out in that damn hallway.
Yep.
And no one did anything.
No one stepped
And
in.
do you think this comes down to fear, Todd? Are they fearing maybe someone in that room, or is this just the mentality of these animals? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Is it fear that you'll be the one, and I know this is like weird, you're the one that's going to be ostracized, or I'm afraid that if I tell, or is this just that mentality inside this gang? I call it a gang. They're
It is a gang. It is a gang. It's the culture, Brian. It's the culture. Marcy Correctional Facility has a reputation for being, I don't, I'm going to use a term
Sure.
of heavy-handed, but
Yep.
that for some reason doesn't give this justice for what it is. It was murder. But nonetheless, they had a reputation at Marcy.
Yeah, I've read some other articles about Marcy. I think Duty Ron might have had a former inmate that called in and actually spoke on a show about this beat up squad. I mean, it's been known about. So it's these these officers again had this opportunity to jump in and say, all right, we've had enough here. It's had enough. Let's stop. But we'll continue to play. And Todd, let me know at any point that you need to stop and comment, please.
Sweeping his hand to the door in the direction of the door and Kiefer leaving. This shows that Trombley is indeed the head of the beat-up squad. Next, Walrath taps Sergeant Masho to back up so he can punch Brooks harder on the table while he's handcuffed. Let's watch that again. Now, outside in the hallway, Kessler and Shay Schaff and Michael Fisher talk. Kessler actually does most of the talking. He seems to be explaining something related to Brooks. It looks like he's describing a physical confrontation because you'll see in a second he backs up and then gestures to the wall. Here comes Walrath thanking Kessler for something, slapping him on the back, Kessler slapping him back, them laughing and joking, and now we're back in the room. Anzalone, Kingsley, Gallagher, and Farina are standing over Brooks, who's unconscious on the table. Kingsley has his hand on Brooks's throat. It's 9:27. They lift Brooks off the table. Anzalone on one side, Kingsley on the other. Sergeant Mashaw in the background looking on. There's blood on his face. His nose looks broken. He appears to be in and out of consciousness. Both Anzalone and Kingsley touch his neck and his head. Anzalone punches him in the side of the ribs. Kingsley keeps adjusting his grip to get a better grip on Brooks's neck. Trombley gestures, gives him an order to do something. Anzalone is going to put on gloves before he does it. They're going to take him and pin him against the wall in the far rear corner of the room against that window. There's a white window shade that's drawn down over it. Behind that shade is a window similar to the one on the left.
Todd, quick question. Farina, the guy in the front, the stripes on the sleeve, is that a higher ranking officer?
It's actually years of service.
Oh, okay.
Usually, those hash marks, I believe, are usually. I'm not sure in a correctional facility, correctional system, but usually they represent 3 years,
Got
two
it.
or 3 years, but usually 3 years
Each bar is what you're saying.
each bar. Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
It's a thick plexi.
Again, I want everybody to notice there's not one camera, one security camera in this room. They knew where to take Mr. Brooks and do this.
And they think
Glass
their cameras are
window
all off,
with a metal
What's that, Todd?
and they think their cameras are in the off position.
Yeah. Keep that in mind.
mesh cover, and there's a ledge there. There's a windowsill. It's concrete. When they pick him up off the table, Brooks can't walk. So they carry him. He's a small guy compared to them. And they carry him over to the corner and they pin him up against the window ledge. While they're pinning Brooks to the window ledge, Sergeant Mashaw is not letting Nurse Medovic into the room. That's Nurse McMedovic on the right, Sergeant Mashaw on the left. It looks like Medovic wants to get into the room. He's got his gloves on. Mashaw's not having it.
5 years in New York.
Sends Medovic on
5
its
years.
way.
Okay.
These are Brooks' last moments. There's Kessler, Anzalone, and Kingsley with Brooks pinned up against the wall. Now it's 9:31. The nurses are still outside the room. Kingsley, Anzalone, and Kessler are still in the corner with Brooks. Now Kessler seems to be applying pressure. Anzalone just lifted Brooks and threw him into the air twice. Brooks seems completely limp like a rag doll. It's 9:32. They finally let the nurses into the room. Brooks is on the table unconscious. Gallagher is stripping his pants off. Anzalone, Kingsley are still there. Now it's 9:35. Anzalone is leaving.
It's just so the audience knows he's passed. There's
He's
nothing.
gone.
They're trying to
Kashno
find a
is
pulse.
trying to
There's
find a
nothing.
pulse.
He's dead.
Brooks. So is Medovic on the other side.
And they're laughing, Todd. Look at this in the background. These officers are
Sergeants
laughing.
Mashnall and Trombley are joking and laughing in the background. 9:36. The nurse realizes it's hopeless.
Yeah, he's dead.
No pulse.
Nothing. He's dead. And now you gotta see the panic in this
9:41.
guy with the
Medovic is still
brown
trying to
shirt.
find a pulse. Kingsley still has his hands on Brooks. Sergeant Trombley is going to enter the picture and go to the left, go to Brooks's head, and retrieve a small white object from what appears to be Brooks's face. Let's watch that again. It seems to me that could very well be a piece of the white rag that Farina used to gag Brooks.
And from what I understand, and I could be wrong on this, but I read some reports that the white rags that were shoved into Brooks's mouth were actually Clorox wipes.
Yeah.
That's what they did to him.
Yeah.
The nurse is pulling the portable defibrillator out of the wall. That's in that red package. He's going to hook the wires up to Brooks and see if it works, but it's not gonna. The Department of Corrections and Community Supervision said that Brooks died at Wynn Hospital in Utica on December 10th. That's more than 2 hours away from this moment, and it's only a 10-minute ambulance ride away.
There's no words, Brian. There's no words. Monsters. You know, there's in public safety, as I mentioned earlier, there is a duty to intervene. I've been in that situation and I intervened. And I said to the heavy-handed trooper I was working with, I'm not getting in front of internal affairs because you can't control your emotions. Don't ever do that again, or I'll return repayment to you. Those were my words.
So I'm very interested why hate crime charges were not brought on these gentlemen. I don't even say gentlemen. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I even used that word to describe these animals. I think it's just in my good nature to say that when I talk about people. But I'm just curious why there's no hate crime charges. I think that everybody in that room, and I don't give a shit about manslaughter. I think that everybody in that room should be charged with murder, second-degree murder. But some of them getting manslaughter. They could see 5 to 10 years, according to New York law. The guys that are facing second-degree murder, 25 years.
I'm wondering, Brian, if additional charges for civil rights violations, to your point about the hate crimes, I'm wondering
It's
from
a hate
the
crime.
perspective of civil rights.